Okay, Gwïon, this one's for you. This isn't a question, it's actually a statement, but we just want your thoughts on it anyway. It says, if something good happens, Christians say it was God's work. But if something bad happens, they say it's God's will or part of his plan. God just becomes an excuse to explain anything that happens.
Yeah, this was an interesting question. I mulled it over as best I could to try and understand what you were coming from. First things first, in response to understanding that bad things happen, I would first and foremost say that we do live in a fallen world. We believe that we live in a fallen world because of at the beginning of the world, it was perfect as God made it. He made all things, and he said that they were good, and that's how things were. It's because of our sin as people and what we did through Adam eating the fruit that we have been plunged into this world of sin. So, but it's also incorrect to say that when bad things happen, when there are earthquakes or tornadoes and all sorts of natural disasters, that God is set apart and lets that happen by complete autonomy, that God is not a part of that. That would go against God's character, because he's a personal God, and he's a God who is with us, and he's in the world. And so to say that God doesn't cause those things to happen would also be incorrect. So we do have to have that understanding that God does bring the bad people. And in response to why we thank God when good things happen, I think a lot of atheists or agnostics will pose the example that Christians are silly when they've gone through surgery and they've just had a heart transplant or something, and they say it's gone successfully, and say, oh, I thank God for this heart transplant. And they don't thank the doctor, and they don't thank the surgeon or the anesthesiologist. They thank God. But really, we thank God in the thanking of those people. We see the skill and the technique that God has given to those people who've been able to do so. We thank you, God, for the medicine that's allowed for that to happen. We thank God for providing the other person who's provided the transplant. Maybe we don't go as much into detail as often as we should, but it's thanking God for the providence of everything that the world brings us. Even in this fallen, broken world, there is still so much joy that we see in creation that God gives us. And it's also it would be wrong to say that we should leave the world as it is. That we should leave the world broken, and by our actions, we're not. When we thank God, we don't think we're making any difference, because it's all in God. Because we believe that people are made Christians, because we're his tools as Christians, and we're put on earth to spread the word and to let the gospel be known. That's why we're making this video, because we want people to hear the message of the gospel, and we want people to come to Christ and come to know him. But the Bible says the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few, which is telling us that the reapings are there. People are here to hear the words, and if God didn't use us as tools and to spread the word, then there would be no other way to let the word be known. I mean, that's we touched on that lightly when we discussed people who've never heard the gospel. People who haven't heard the gospel can hear it because of Christians who go out and spread the word. I think I've touched on everything. I'm just going to make sure. And if the question is asking that having a God is an excuse for being thankful and blaming someone for everything that happens, well, it's not that. It's much harder to live today to praise and live for God than it is to not live and praise God. It would be much easier if we just believed that the whole world was an accident, and that everything happens by chance, that some people are lucky, some people aren't. We could just live our daily lives without a care in the world. It might sound nice to some, and to be able to live like that and live in a world where that's just the way it goes. It is what it is. To live by those words, it's much harder to believe in God and live a life knowing that someone is pulling all the strings. But it's the world we accept, and it's the world we know, because we know it to be true. And it might be a bitter pill to swallow, but we believe it to be true. Does that answer the question or the statement?
Yeah, I think that it hits on the main topics raised in that statement there. But I also think, look, the world is bad. Bad things do happen. Awful things do happen. And that doesn't just mean there's awful volcanoes and earthquakes and tornadoes and all those kind of things. It's also bad on a personal level. We can see the impact of bad things that we do, whether that's with our words or with our actions. We can see that badness. And actually, God doesn't just leave us stranded in this fallen world, as Gwïon was describing it. Actually, there is a way out. There is a route out that is covered in love and covered in joy and covered in so much more than the desperate sadness that can be seen, and that is Jesus. So, yes, there's awful things that do happen, but yes, there is an opposite and not equal, an opposite and so much greater reaction from God, and that's there is some. There's so many small things like that can add up that actually show that there is something about society that is missing at the moment.
And yet the thing that stands out to me of Christianity, and it's a word we throw around quite a lot, the word